Welcome back, chapter 13. And still he had nothing to say. Well, almost next to nothing. Okay, well, that is freaking wonderful. Just terrific, Eva thought, as she smoothed her expression into one of the serene elegance and tried her hardest to focus all her attention on tonight's date, a charming financier named Quentin Prescott. Quentin was everything the gym rat Trace Stone wasn't. And as a bonus, he was also light years towards tilting over into the just right for her column, away from brooding Mr. Aiden Walker, who had said all of maybe 5 words to her since he arrived late to meet her and the rest of the crew at their current location. Not that she was paying any attention to him, mind you. Sure, yeah, you was. You noticed that. The station had sent a car to pick Eva up at her office and take her to her apartment at 4 o'clock. With the airing of her first segment, it seemed her popularity had doubled, maybe tripled. She expected a bit of an uptick, but nothing like what she'd seen since Tuesday. Her Facebook requests had gone off the charts. Twitter wanted to give her one of those official little checks that they gave real celebrities, like movie stars or maybe Kardashians. It was all quite overwhelming. Doing something simple like taking the bus or the subway to work or doing a quick Starbucks run was now a mission to be carefully planned out with tactical precision if she didn't want to be gawked over or mobbed with 1,000 catcalls or supposedly innocent questions. She now knew for certain that she had to keep her outward profile low at least until the show was over and she had faded from recent memory. The upside was that with the way the media cycle went, she suspected it would take about 3 weeks tops after the airing of the wedding. Upon her arrival home, she only had time for a hot shower before Mitz arrived with her hair and makeup artist to make her look put together, but of course not too put together. She tried to hide her disappointment when Louise arrived with Stan and only one other guy, with no hint or word of or from Aiden, just a skeleton crew to prep her for her evening at the opera with Quentin. Still, she refused to ask about Aiden. She wouldn't do it. She guessed he'd taken her at her word and was keeping his distance. And that was fine. Their fabulous one night stand was obviously enough to put him off her forever. Finally, he turned up on the set. Eva frowned as she spied him huddled with a crew member next to the equipment van parked on the corner of 63rd and Amsterdam. Is there everything all right? Quentin's voice pulled her back his way and she blinked, coming out of her trance. Whoops, she better focus on her date and the actual task at hand. Besides, it wasn't like focusing on a man like Quentin was a hardship. He gave her a kind smile and she felt her chest tighten a bit. She wasn't being fair thinking about Aiden at a time like this. Quentin was a perfect pleasant man, tall with a perfectly pleasant face, broad shoulders, and a pleasant smile. Eva could feel her discomfort churn up from deep in her lower belly. What was that? Pleasant 3 times to describe one man? I was just saying that. I was saying she said pleasant 3 times. Oh, that could be a good sign, and it ain't. Come on and focus, Eva. You're in PR. You can come up with something better than pleasant. She moved from his pleasant smile. She moved from his pleasant smile to check out his attire. Well, his suit was sharp. Eva cut herself bonus points for not going for the mental pleasant as she added 2 more for convenience, disregarding the fact that she was sure a stylist had probably picked out the suit for him, just as her dress had been picked out for her. Better to just go with the fantasy at this point. Either way, Quentin's style was on point, and his well-cut suit set off her red cocktail dress perfectly. What more could a woman ask for on a normally boring Thursday night? Also, he was a better choice than the guy with the kid. Eva suspected that Aiden had something to do with Quentin being here in lieu of that guy. Excuse me? At first, I asked if you enjoyed opera, and then, when you didn't respond, I asked if everything was all right. Eva smiled, smoothing down her dress and giving him her full attention, or at least making an attempt at a full attention with a cordless mic attached to the back and a small army surrounded her. Film army surrounded her. Not to mention the distraction of a certain nonchalant playboy who was doing his best to ignore her. It was a good thing she was in the middle of New York. At least it seemed she was the only one who thought this situation was in any way out of the ordinary. Eva slid her arm into the crook of Quentin. I'm fine, thanks. Still not quite used to being the center of attention. Normally, I like to leave that up to my clients. And as for the opera, honestly, I haven't been since I was a teenager on a school trip. But I've always wanted to come back. I'm sure I'll enjoy it. She let her eyes glance briefly Aiden's way once more. This time she caught him as his eyes slid her way, and he took in her every movement. She tried to, but couldn't ignore the instant heat she felt as she purposely led Quentin away toward the tall, sweeping arches of the opera house, putting Aiden and their knight both literally and figuratively behind her. Aiden felt his body involuntarily tense as he watched Eva entwine her arm with Quentin Prescott and look up at him, flashing that smile of hers. Her full lips were painted a glossy red to match her dress, which was the color of a new fire engine. On anyone else, the tight elastic bands that were subbing for fabric would probably look cheap, but no, not on her. There was nothing about her that was cheap. The woman was class all the way, from this evening's slightly messy updo to the delicate black satin sandals on her feet and back to those damn pearls. All that tight, understated reserve of hers had him dying to grab her, flip her over his shoulder like some type of caveman, run off with her somewhere, and have her calling out his name in ecstasy as she done the other night. But at that thought, he frowned. Of course, those type of things just weren't done, not by anyone with a lick of sense or propriety, and he liked to think he had both, despite what the gossip tabloids had to say about him to keep their circulation up. Besides, she made it clear as she dismissed him from her bed later, when both were satiated by multiple orgasms, that he was a quick rebound screw. Looking at her now and not being some sort of caveman, but an enlightened sort he should respect and just go with her flow. Sure, it was a pleasant surprise that sexually little Miss Pearl button down turned out to be exactly his type and then some. But as for the rest, as for the two being compatible in any other way, no way. She might talk a good game, but she was ready to settle down into something stable. He can tell by the way she was giving it her all on this date with Mr. Smooth, Mr. Money. She was so dead set on the rule of image being everything and all that came along with it that it was seeping from her pores. She was practically lighting up like the tree at Rockefeller Center with this postcard-looking dude. Aiden knew, looking at her now, that there would be no way she could make it with him in a relationship that extended outside the confines of the bedroom. She was not the type who could deal with him being on the road and having to go where the stories went. She'd never understand how he lived for the rush of the adrenaline or how he hoped to really make a difference with the work he did. Hell, her work was all about putting a best face forward and covering up for A-list celebs and Fortune 500 companies. A woman like that was not for him, and he couldn't let his, for the moment, wild feelings for her take him off his game. So despite the twinge of jealousy and this ridiculous urge, Aiden peered closely at the retreating couple to forcefully remove Quentin's fingers from the small of Eva's back. Just like her, he stick with the plan. It was a solid one. He would do his time working 9 to 5. He'd do what he had to do to make his father happy and make his mark with the board. And once that was done, he'd carry on with his life. But it would be solely on his own terms, and this time with both his father's and the board's backing, getting them in line to do more programming that mattered and stepping back from places like this one. There was no way he'd be permanently tied to a desk or a woman. He was one for the open road, and just like he was filler, so to speak, for her, she, if truth be told, was the what? Oh, was the kitten that perfectly scratched a particular annoying itch he currently had. As she turned away with Prescott, Aiden's eyes skimmed over the outline of her perfect, heart-shaped behind as Prescott's hand dared to slide lower. He almost growled out loud as their night together came back, hitting him full force, and the primal instinct to strike threatening to take over. Geez, she was almost too much to resist. The woman was going to drive him mad and mess up all he had mapped out. Aiden's frown went deeper. Their encounter had been frosty when they first laid eyes on each other a few minutes before. From anyone else, he would possibly have expected it, but from her, it came as a bit of a surprise. They should be able to get through this both being cool and adult about things. But as soon as he saw her and tried to talk to her, his voice came out with hints of high school crush that made him inwardly cringe. "Hello, Miss Ward. You're looking lovely today." Lovely? Who the hell said that? Though she did, and it was honestly an understatement. She was gorgeous in the red dress Miss put her in for this date, but still, no need to get gushy. "Thank you, Walker. And thanks for your text update today. Your office is very thorough." Despite the summer heat, her voice could freeze vodka. "It wasn't my office. I sent it myself." The look she gave him was equally cool. "I gathered that." She then looked around, landing on Lou, and smiled. "I think I have to go. It looks as if my date for the evening has arrived. Let's hope he makes for better company than my last man." Ooh, child. The way she emphasized last man had him ready to all but snatch her back and demand to know her meaning. But of course, he already gotten it, even if everyone else listening to the exchange was assuming she was talking about the gym rat from the other day. Good company his ass. If he didn't just days ago give her a goddamn heart-dropping orgasm, a few, as a matter of fact. But what did it matter? Now he was stuck by the van, watching as she took long, sensual strides on the arm of a tall financier, and the two of them silhouetted by the stunning architect of the iconic opera house and the rushing water of the fountain. "Wasn't we just there, Auntie?" "We was just there." "Yep." Okay. Aiden watched as Prescott leaned back, his own eyes taking in Eva's perfect curves. Aiden felt his hands twitch. The memory of her smooth skin, hot to his touch, was still fresh. Prescott grinned wide at something Eva said, and Aiden looked around, kicking himself for not having on a headset yet. Crap. He looked at Eva as she laughed, and they made their way into the New York landmark. Aiden's eyes turned to Louisa, who was smiling. A rare sight when she was deep into her work. Hell, this couldn't be good. It couldn't be happening, could it? Week 2, 10 minutes in, and already Eva had found her Mr. Right. No way would he accept that. Calm down, man. It would be hours before they were out of the opera. There was no need for him to go inside while filming was going on. He was getting all he needed from the team that was inside. Also, the crew was supposed to be sparse. He had set it up so just Lou and Stan were inside to capture any good moments for the segment if they should happen to come up. They had already gotten a couple of shots of the cast during the dress rehearsal, The two of them could handle the intermission banter fine. In all honesty, he could go home or back to the office for a bit, show his face, clear off some of the paper piling on the corner of his desk, and make his father happy. But who was he fooling? After seeing her with Prescott, there was no way he was going back to the office and getting his take on this date through secondhand footage. No, he'd see how things went with his own eyes and judge for himself if the guy could pull an emotion out of her like he could. Hanging back in the van, Aiden tortured himself as he watched every moment, listened for every word along with the text, Mitch and Dave. Eva was stunning as her face filled the banks of monitors. She elegant sat in a chair Prescott pulled out for her in one of the Opera House side luxury boxes, as if this sort of thing was an everyday occurrence. From where the cameras were set up, her face glowed, as though it was lit by soft candlelight, with high and low depths from the illumination of the stage. Her eyes sparkled and her cheeks held a beautiful rosy glow, giving her the quality. She seemed, I don't know how to pronounce that word. She seemed to shiver a bit, and he watched her as her eyes slid left and the camera smoothly panned to Prescott's well-manicured hands. The overly perceptive ass had picked up on her discomfort and rubbed his paws over her bare shoulders and down her arm in what anyone could tell was a vain veiled attempt to get his hands on her. Prescott leaned in, and Aiden heard his voice come through his headset. "Are you cold? Would you like my jacket?" "Yes, thank you." Eva's voice was low and breathy. It was way too close a reminder of the breathy whisper and deep moan she given him the other night. Stirring of desire churned up in Aiden's belly, and he fought to calm them down. Aiden turned to Mitch. "Are these levels good? I can hardly hear." Mitch put down the gyro he picked up from the food truck outside with an annoying sign and looked at his control panel. "They're fine. And really, why are we so worried over every word here? It's not like this segment is going to run longer than 3 minutes." He shook his head, then shot Aiden a look before taking a pull of his soda that let him know he didn't like having his experience questioned, potentially head honcho or not. Aiden shrugged. He got it, and Mitch was probably right. But still, he wanted good audio as he watched Prescott remove his jacket and place it around Eva's shoulders. "Thank you," she said, gave him an easy smile, leaning back. The two watched the performance in silence, with barely any action until about 45 minutes in when Prescott shifted. It was as if he had his move timed to go with the action of the stage, so that his little move happened as the music went to a full crescendo and the action on the stage became particularly dramatic. Sword fights, swooning soprano, banging drums, clashing cymbals were all a backdrop for the casual Casanova to slide closer to Eva and slip his hands into hers at the right moment and bring her hands to his lips, kissing her fingertips. Lou made sure every movement was caught on camera, and yes, Mitch was right. The sound levels were perfect. Everything was on tape, from Prescott maneuvering to Eva's surprising reaction as Prescott leaned in closer to her ear. It may be in Italian, but I think some things are universal. Aiden couldn't help his eyes roll and was thankfully bolstered when both Mitch and Dave burst out laughing. "Was that corny or what?" Mitch cackled, wiping at the lettuce that threatened to escape his mouth and hit his precious console. "It sure as hell is," Dave said, "but I've got to give it to him for going for it. It's no telling with women. Look, she seems to be eating it up." Aiden's blood heated as he watched Eva smile warmly and nod Prescott's way. She really couldn't fall for a stupid line like that, could she? He watched as she turned back to the stage, but now leaned in a little closer to Prescott. Meanwhile, the actors played out a bloody fight scene. signaling for the intermission would be starting soon. There was a boom, and then the sound of cymbals that was so loud both techs winced, pulling away their headsets. Aiden remained transfixed and didn't even flinch. He watched stoic as the curtain went down and Eva slipped her hand from Prescott, joining the others in the thunderous applause. Oh hell, he really should just go. Why torture himself? Leave her to Prescott and the rest of the dates and go about his business. He had no real business being here anyway. This had nothing to do with his plans or his endgame. Still, he stared at the screen, watching as the couple got up and the camera went in and out of focus. And for just a moment, he saw her let out a breath as she stretched her back as if she'd been holding it stiff for far too long. That tiny movement, when she didn't feel she had to be on, and her face relaxed, reminded him of their night and what she could be. Aiden stepped out of the van and headed toward the concert hall. People crowded the atrium, everyone stunning and smiling and generally happy to see and be seen. Aiden wanted none of that. He scanned the intermission crowd looking for his crew. He spotted Prescott over by the bar gathering drinks. Then he quickly shifted right and looked up to see Eva. Honing in as if trained on a signal from her red dress, he saw her going into the ladies' room. There was no sign of Lou or Stan, who had probably had enough small talk for their tiny segment and were now getting ready for the next setup, when Prescott would return with the drinks. For reality TV, things on this show were pretty well scripted out. But now Aiden, fueled on complete irrationally, headed up the grand stairs and waited for her. What the hell was he doing? If anyone saw him there, that would be their first question. And though he was usually a quick thinker on his feet, he had no answer. He couldn't very well answer. I'm waiting for the talent to come out so I can just be close to her for a moment, get a rise out of her, and remind her of the mind-blowing sex we had the other night. All were true, but all were unacceptable answers. Aiden looked at his watch and ignored the odd look he got from a pinch-faced woman with dripping diamonds as she left the ladies' room. No worries, ma'am. I'm not casting case in the place. He hoped his nod to her said that, but based on the way she practically sprinted away with her clutch held tightly to her chest, he didn't think it had worked. Where was Eva? Finally, she walked out. She held her head down at first, but when she looked up, he couldn't deny the instant sexual charge she got as her eyes widened and then narrowed at the sight of him. He put his finger to his lips, stepped forward, and leaned in close to her delicate ear. Don't talk, he whispered. The mic will pick it up. She pulled back and glared. He could see her color rising and the fact that she was fighting to keep it in check. As throngs of people milled around them, he could tell she just realized that she'd forgotten to turn off the mic when she gone to the bathroom, and now the rest of the crew had heard her use the toilet. Not that they cared or paid any real attention. When it was a crowd of this size, all murmured at once they weren't looking for those types of sound. Aiden took in her features, her eyes on fire, nostrils flaring, ready to rant. And in that moment, it was all he wanted. He looked around and saw a side exit, grabbing her hand and pulling her in. Get your girl, Aiden. The door closed behind them with a satisfying click. Aiden instantly went down on his knees in front of her, delighted by her sharp intake of breath. He reached up and lifted her dress up to her thighs. The delicious scent of her right in front of him had her wanting to close his eyes and bury his face into her. But no, he flipped her around quickly and reached to the back of her dress and switched off the mic before turning her back around and coming to his feet. Eva opened her mouth wide, about to let go, when he leaned in and kissed her. Get it on the floor. Okay, kissed her hard, pulling her into him and taking all he could in the seconds he had. He felt his chest expand as his dick hardened when rigid at first, she finally relented and kissed him back, her lush body going soft and against him. She opened her mouth, and once again he tasted that sweet honey, and he felt like he could happily feast on it forever. Finally, he pulled back and breathed in deep. The silence between them hung loud and long as they stared at each other. He moved in close to her once again, and this time she backed up, pressing in hard against the wall. Aiden remained still. He held up his hands and leaned in again, so close to her ear only she'd be able to hear. Mic or no mic, he didn't want those outside to know they were there. I want you. Please say you'll have me tonight. He pulled back and looked at her. Eva just stared as the quiet loomed between them, and she gave him a look that simmered with both desire and rage. Then suddenly, the lights flickered, and even in the stairwell indicated intermission was over. Once, twice, Aiden turned her around again to go back to his knees to flip her mic on. You know, there is an easy way to do that, she said. My dress is pretty low in the back, and it has a zipper. You don't have to go down that way. Aiden looked up at her. Maybe I like it when you have me on my knees. Okay. He saw the hint of a smile as she shook her head, then pulled the dress down, but she didn't answer him. He came up as the lights flickered again, and she kissed him before whispering in his ear, I don't even like you like that, Aiden Walker. You better stop playing, girl. Stop lying. Aiden closed his eyes briefly, then leaned in to nip at her ear and answer her back. Oh, yes. You sure as hell do. She laughed and pulled out of his reach. That's what I'm afraid of, she replied before disappearing back into the venue's hallway. Okay. Eva slipped back into their box after refreshing her lipstick and gave Quentin a brief apology. Are you okay? He asked, his eyes full of questions she had no intentions of answering. She pasted on a well-trained smile. I'm fine. I need an extra moment in the ladies' room away from the crowd. I've come down with a sudden headache, so I took a few aspirin. Nothing to worry about. I'll be fine. She sat in her seat and looked forward, though somehow feeling the heat of 1,000 eyes on the back of her neck. Once again, Quentin placed his jacket around her shoulders. She turned, giving him a nod of thanks. But still, she could feel another presence hot and insistent on her swollen lips, making breathing difficult and concentration almost impossible. She turned and looked at the camera. It was as if he were right there, watching her every move, honing in on her every emotion. She was a fool for having had that night with him, and a damn fool for thinking she could have it and then they could both just get over it like it was no big deal. While he watched her go on orchestrated dates with other men like their night had never happened. Eva's heart was racing with the thought of him on the other side of the camera, just out of her reach, picking up on everything she said and did. Eva looked past the camera to Louisa, and she was hit with the woman's tight jaw and jutting chin. The narrowing of her eyes told Eva she didn't buy her excuses about the headache. Not at all. There was a reason she had this job. This woman was no dummy. But no matter, there was no way Eva could cower or lower her eyes and give herself away any further to any more of the crew. She looked at Louisa straight on and gave her a smile. She indicated the empty chair in the corner of the box. Why don't you take a load off, Louisa? You have to be getting tired yourself. No need to worry about me. I can do tired when I'm dead. Louisa narrowed her eyes, turned and grabbed a tissue. She reached out towards Eva's neck. As Eva pulled back, Lou leaned in close so only she could hear that. I'm fixing your makeup. You seem to have smudged lipstick on your neck somehow. Eva felt the heat climb up her neck. She hoped it didn't show in her face. As calmly as she could, she snatched the tissue from Louisa's hand and wiped the side of her neck. For the briefest of moments, she let her eyes drift back to the camera and gave it a glare before turning to face towards the stage once again. She hoped he was watching. Something in her told her that of course he was. Damn, Aiden. As if her life wasn't complicated enough, he had to go and complicate it further. More and more, she regretted the day she had stepped into WBC studio, or at least that that was the line she was telling herself. That's the end of chapter 13. Well, these two is something else. They are something else. And Louisa know. She know because now the lipstick on her neck is on Aiden's lip, and I don't think he remembered to wipe it off. So that's where the 2 and 2 gonna make 1, and Louisa gonna be the one because that girl, she be paying attention. Okay, so that was really good. I like that chapter. Okay, so I'm gonna see y'all in the next chapter. Bye.